Have you ever noticed that we spend most of our lives focusing on things, the object, the goal, the house, the money, the relationship, the opportunity? We're constantly looking at what we could be rather than what we've already got, for instance. But what if the most important part isn't the thing at all? What if it's the space between the things? Recently, I heard a fascinating explanation from a physicist discussing something called a quantum leap. Now, before you switch off because you think this is going to be a complicated scientific lesson, stay with me because this completely changed the way I think about manifestation, consciousness, and even meditation. In the teeny tiny world of subatomic particles, when an electron absorbs a photon, which is a particle of light, of the correct energy, it becomes excited and then moves into a higher energy state. What's interesting is that it doesn't appear to travel in a smooth path. It isn't like watching an aeroplane flying from New York to London. It isn't continuous. In fact, one moment it's here, the next moment it's over there. Physicists call this a quantum leap. Now here's where things get really interesting, because the natural question is, where did it go? But the better question will be, well, what happens in the gap? Now, from a strict physics perspective, this is where things become complicated. But from a human perspective, it's a fascinating question, because we experience gaps everywhere in life. The pause between breaths, the silence between sounds, the space between thoughts, the stillness between one chapter of our life ending and the next one beginning. And yet, most of us spend our lives trying to avoid these spaces. We fill every silence, we distract ourselves, we scroll, we worry, we plan, we obsess, because the gap feels uncomfortable, uncertain. But what if the gap isn't empty? What if it's where possibility lives? Think about manifestation for a moment. Most people become obsessed with the outcome, the relationship, the money, the business, the house. They're staring at the object, but the object is only the final expression. The real transformation happens in the space between who you are now and who you are becoming. That's the gap. The old identity hasn't fully disappeared. The new identity hasn't fully formed yet either. You're suspended somewhere in between. And if you've ever been on a manifestation journey, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the space between when you set desire and when you finally realize the desired reality. That is the gap I call the journey. And it's that strange period where things no longer feel the same, but they haven't yet fully arrived yet either. You feel different, you think differently, you're seeing signs, you're noticing synchronicities, but the manifestation hasn't landed yet. In other words, you're in the gap. And most people mistake this stage for failure, or they get confused or even bored. They think nothing is happening, but often it's when everything is happening. It's in the gap. This is why I talk about manifestation as a process rather than the outcome event we call manifestation. Most manifestation teachers focus on techniques to set an intention, but no one is talking about this period between. And this is predominantly where my talks are based, because transformation rarely occurs all at once. There's a transition, a space, a period of becoming. And what struck me most about this quantum metaphor was the idea that possibility exists before reality becomes visible or takes form in our 3D reality. Every outcome exists first as a potential, a possibility, an option, a probability, before eventually becoming a physical experience. And this doesn't just apply to manifestation, it applies to creativity, innovation, relationships, business, every major breakthrough in your life. First, there is possibility, then there is reality. And between the two sits the gap. So perhaps the question isn't how do I get what I want? Perhaps the better question should be, can I learn to become comfortable in the gap? Can I trust the process when I can't yet see the outcome? Can I remain present in the uncertainty between where I am and where I'm going? Because maybe that's where growth actually occurs. Maybe that's where transformation happens. And maybe that's where possibility lives, or where you give form to possibility. So let's not mistake it for the thing itself, but in the space between. And once you begin to pay particular attention to that gap, you'll notice it everywhere, in the silence, in the stillness, in your meditation, in the pause between breaths, in the pause between chords, in the moments when life appears to stand still. And perhaps those moments aren't empty after all. Perhaps they're full of possibility and potentiality. And isn't that truly wonderful?